day to you, and you're most welcome in my humble cellar. There's a very good chance that by the time you're watching this, we'll have actually taken delivery of D20 Delving from Customs. Where it is. Okay, now the first thing I had in there was something I would have expected to see on a head shop poster back in the 60s. It's profound, but I'm not too exactly sure what put it on there. The views of the past through the lens of the present will dwell in the trash heap of tomorrow, where presentism properly belongs. Well, I'm not exactly sure what presentism is, unless it means living in the moment. Anyway, thanks. Speaking of cons, I hope to see you at Gary Con. I turned 50 while there, so both D&D and I are the same age. And it would be a great present if you were able to sign my very, very special book. And I'd be glad to. It's a very, very special book. On turn-based strategy games on the PC, I just recently discovered Master of Magic a few months back. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I played all 3 or 4 iterations that it had. Game is ancient now. Will be 30 years old this year, but somehow I missed it in my youth. It's basically Civ, but you're a powerful wizard ruling over a nation of your choice of fantasy race instead of the caricature of history. Instead of researching technologies, you research spells, some of which can have a massive impact on the world. They remade it recently if you can't stand to go back to the pixelated sprites of the mid-90s, but looking right now, the original is on sale, $3 on Steam. Yeah, I remember that game. I loved it. I thought at the time it was it was certainly one of the very top 2 or 3 fantasy games, turn-based strategy that were available at the time. And there are a number of them. They're all most of them are real stinkers. The group I play with think Cleric is there to heal the party and do not partake in a fight. When I started playing, my Cleric was on the front line because the other players were mages. Well, yeah, I guess you'd have to be, wouldn't you? My Clerics always fight and heal during the fight. Well, that's what a good Cleric should do. In my worlds, Clerics are even more empowered to do stuff like that. A Cleric and a Mage, well, yeah, the Cleric's got to fight, or the Mage is going to get croaked, and in the meantime, and then he'll get croaked as well. Yeah, I can see why you would fight. I agree with you. Dragonborn, as written, leaves a lot to be desired. Ever since I discovered Appendix N, however, I have been insatiably curious about injecting more of those influences into my game. It occurs to me that Dragonborn would make a fantastic base for introducing Jack Vance's Arcvolts from Morion, Rialto the Marvelous, to Dying Earth, into a campaign. I think the Archvolts, however that's pronounced. With some tweaking or just reflavoring the Dragon Breath, they might make an intriguing choice, although fitting them into a party might be a challenge. Yeah, no shit. That's what Appendix N is for. Appendix N is there for you to conjure up out of the mud of creation special stuff for your campaign. You don't need to go with somebody else's crap idea and make it better. Make your own. Do it yourself. They won't know what's going on. They won't be able to predict what will happen. You'll have more fun, and they'll get more experience than they would otherwise. And as to fitting them into a challenge, yeah. Yeah, I guess that'd be a challenge, all right, fitting them into a group. Watch how you breathe there, Bob. Deathless Bob smells like he died 40 years ago and has breath of halitosis he aimed to save against poison. Mr. Tim, sir, could you tell us viewers the history of psionics in D&D? I've done this before. I read somewhere that Gary lamented and didn't use it. I know it's an eldritch wizardry. Just curious, and thank you, sir. Okay. Immediately upon the release of the Mind Flayer, my innate sense of fairness cried foul. Back in my day, there were 3 monsters that you effectively had no defense against. That was the Mind Flayer, the Thought Eater, and the Brain Mole. All of which had these mental things that could screw up your mind and lose your wisdom and intelligence and all kinds of crap that I thought was innately unfair because player characters were defenseless. And as an aside, I went and looked up psionic monsters in D&D the other day on Google, and it must have been 40 of them, and probably most of them are 5e. But I thought, Jesus. So Gary and I had a long debate about all this and over the course of several weeks. I told him it just wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair that there was no defense or no way to fight a brain mole. You know, you couldn't protect yourself from their particular skill. So, okay, go ahead. I was given the go ahead and create psionics, which I did. Now, as originally created, psionics, there was only an infinitesimal chance out of 150 characters that got rolled up that one of them might have the spark of psionic ability, which would then have to be nurtured and trained and et cetera, et cetera. No, that's not the way it worked. Everybody's campaign had psionics running around all over everywhere, and most people hadn't taken the time and the effort to figure out exactly how it worked. So they threw up their hands, oh, I can't understand this, it's crap. Well, go back and look again. And it was cleaned up a little later edition. But psionics came about as a means of fairness. If you have no psionic defenses, you are at the mercy of a Mind Flayer. And if you can't take him out in the first or second round, you're going to be a drooling idiot. Brain moles, thought eaters. So psionics was created to be was supposed to be the possibility that humans might have this ability. It was envisioned when I worked it out that a psionicist would be an NPC, a very valuable NPC, very hard to find, very expensive to hire, but he could do this kind of stuff. It was thought at the time that if you were discovered to have a little bit of potential for psionic skills, that you had to get trained to use them, and it was a slow process because it's an alien thought process, really. Alien in that, not capital A alien coming out of your chest, but alien in that not normal, not frequent behavior, not expected behavior. And so I unleashed psionics upon the world, and some have come to appreciate it. Some have not. What are you going to do? I was a heavy fan of Doctor Strange and the comics, and so there's a lot of stuff in there that if you're also a Doctor Strange reader, you'll see that a lot of concepts and things came out of there. But that's how it got created, to be fair to the players, to give them the possibility of a defense. Otherwise, Mind Flayers would have ruled the world. What would the fun be there? I mean, as the dungeon creator, all you had to do is put 4 or 5 mind flayers in there, working in concert, and pretty soon, every party that ends up in there either ends up as monster chow or drooling idiots. What are your thoughts on H.P. Lovecraft's work, and have you played any or read any edition of Call of Cthulhu RPG? I'm not a fan of Lovecraft. I'm not a fan of horror. And his is some mind-bending horror. It just never appealed to me. I am deficient, I guess, in that regard. I never got into all the horrible Japanese sci-fi, Rodan and Mothra and all that stuff. That was all playing when I was a kid, and I just never got into it. And I did go see the Edgar Allan Poe movies with Vincent Price, but that wasn't so much horror as it was suspense. And I just never got into it. Have I played the RPG? No. Though I did participate in a playtest with Sandy Peterson at a North Texas RPG Con several years ago with the new board game. But I'll be honest, and I don't remember a lot of it, and I didn't understand a lot of it when I was just asked to step in for somebody that had to leave. And as soon as we could find somebody that knew what was going on, I stepped back out. I had a cleric in my group that got cursed. And then I decided to switch her alignment to evil. So all our prayers became reversed. The first thing she did was to cast a heal wounds on a wounded companion. I told her that the words came out of her mouth were a reverse prayer. Instead, she inflicted wounds. The horror on her face as I told her. The player is a religious person, a Mennonite, and I thought, oops, maybe I went too far. But when I talked to her afterwards, she said she loved it because it was so unexpected. You got lucky. Or maybe not. Maybe you realized, maybe you weren't too worried about it freaking everybody out. But that's great. I mean, you got lucky. You did something weird. Now, we're going to talk about clerics going wrong a little later. So I'm going to let that ride for now. But then the poster did say, just to clarify, she did go back to her temple and get her soul cleansed and reverted back to normal after a few sessions. And some wag asked the Mennonite or the player character. The player character was the answer. Okay. So now we'll go on to another clerical question. And I like these because in my will of blame, clerics are, in my world, period, clerics are much more potent and much more formidable than they are in stock standard first edition or OD&D. There's the rules still, anyway. I've explained that before. Okay, question. Clerical matters or give up your vows. I've been catching up on the last... Okay. Background. PC is a cleric. Their patron deity, let's call her E, is diametrically opposed to another deity, let's call her C, because I don't want to pronounce those names, even though I know how. Had entered into a pact, ceasefire, the conditions of which prohibit PC cleric from entering into deity C's, domain, temples, etc., on any business whatsoever. However, isn't there always a however? It's what makes life interesting. However, in order to rescue a beloved PC from a cult of deity C, cleric PC wants to renounce their faith, hoping to return to it after the campaign, and prepared to pay in terms of penance, money, even level drain. Wow. First question, would you apply any sort of level drain in the case of a clerical renouncement of their patron deity? They're not changing enlightenment, just renouncing their patron deity. But, next question, does renouncing a patron deity affect alignment? Is it an infringement of alignment to do so? And What penance would I apply for a playset cleric to return to their patron deity and regain what they had lost by renouncing? Okay. When it gets into deities, I've always been a little loosey-goosey on that. I don't know, maybe it's 8 years of Catholic school or all the other stuff, but I've never gotten into great detail. If a player in my campaign, a cleric in my campaign said, oh yeah, I picked a god, his name's Ruth, okay, I don't need to go any further. Now, having said that, I believe that clerics have a strict reason, a strict compulsion to not fool around with alignments. Now, having said that, if the original alignment was chaotic, well, have fun, DM, and just let all hell rain. Neutral? Yeah, I was never real fond of neutral deities. And good. And if they're good and they renounce their deity, I would see that as a huge stain on their honor and on their ethics and their ethos. And renouncing is a much more serious matter than straying. All right? It's a much greater matter than simply straying, where the DM goes, yeah, your soul's getting a little gray there. I think you need to go do this thing for these people and earn some good juju back. I would think that. Level drain? No. If a cleric in my world were to renounce the deity that had been their patron up to that time, that would have the potential for some really serious consequences. Now, if you want to get into the Western ethic and your cleric starts out as sort of evil or sort of neutral and at some point wants to become good, well, that's the whole Western ethic of, achieving salvation and all that. You handle that your way. But I would think that saying one day, okay, I don't worship Crom anymore, I'm going to worship Ariadne. Crom's going to get pretty pissed at you. And I would think that Crom, there's a good case in point, or a good possibility that Crom would decide to inflict some punishment. Now, punishment could be of an affliction, a disease, some temporary loss of some ability points. There's many ways you could approach that in a temporary sort of way, but in my world, you would have to give up if you're going to renounce Crom and worship Ariadne. That's one thing. But if Crom gets pissed, well, then I'd have Crom set a geas upon you as a, well, why shouldn't I kill you for renouncing me, you scurrilous bastard? I might do that. Losing levels, no. Why not have, depending upon the levels, the higher level being the more severe transgression, If they renounce, I might have a small chance that some market cane gets placed upon their soul and they can't be a cleric to anybody from then on. And then what you want to do if they want to become a fighter, or if they're just going to abandon the character, whatever, if they're just going to become a fighter, well, if they're a 5th level cleric and they've done some fighting, they hadn't gotten their experience points just for doing heal stuff, then I bump them down to 4, possibly 3, possibly. Again, it's a, feather on the scales type thing. But that's how I would do it. It's not how there's any canon that says how it's supposed to be done. But I've always felt that if you're going to play cleric and you're going to take the advantages of being a cleric, then you ought to stick with what you started out with. That's not to say that the DM can't make a certain circumstance or scenario where you might aspire to higher things, and while not neglecting or releasing your affiliation here, find a higher calling. That's fine. That's all up to you. That's all up to your ecclesiastical courts and your diet of worms and, whatever you want to do. But I would certainly, I would make it a preponderance of chance that they would not be able to go back to their original deity. Just me. That's the way I play it in my world. Penance? Yeah. Walk on your hands and knees across the desert full of sharp stones. It won't get you any help, but you'll have a long time to think about what you did. Regarding a cultural appropriation, your comments are spot on. I'm always influenced by what I read, whether fiction or nonfiction, history when I'm considering fiction or history when I'm considering a new campaign. I certainly want to be insensitive some culturally. I think if I was presented with a situation, I'd do what you suggested and talk out what I wanted to do with the campaign. And if it bothered anyone, I asked what their input and what they felt couldn't be okay with them. I tend to think that fantasy is based on myth and legend, and as such, we are all tied together by our shared love and appreciation for the same. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe not, but I love myths and legends from all over the world. On a different note, I know you played miniature war games, particularly Micro Armor. Did you have a favorite rule systems or miniatures? Damn it, yes, I did. It's by War Games Research Group, and it's rules for armor and infantry from like 32 to 46. It's the beginning ones. The first year's rather odd, and it just takes it through the end of the war. And I really, really, really liked the rules. That's what Tramp and I played with on the sand table exclusively. War Games Research Group. Look up armor rules in that time period, and you'll see them. They were an odd-shaped set of rules like this, about that tall, and with a red pebble grain cover. I have no idea if they're even still being published, and if they are, whether it's a red pebble grain cover. But I do know I felt, and Tramp felt, and a couple other people I knew that played them felt that they were an excellent set of rules. Now, as an aside, that's about the only time I could ever think of praising a set of English miniatures rules, because they tended to be fiddly as hell. But they were good. Will there be a way that those of us who did not get in on the Kickstarter for the Curse of the Weaver King be able to purchase the product later? It is my understanding that there will be some on sale at GaryCon. I would suggest that you get a hold of World of Game Design. the umbrella for, I think, Old Guard Games is the line that it's under, and check with them. But yes, I believe there is. I believe it's going to be released at GaryCon, and it'll probably be available. Well, it will obviously be available there that weekend and probably elsewhere until they're gone. That's the thing with a Kickstarter. Kickstarters, you figure your budget. Okay, I got 747 sold. I can afford to make 1,000, and make up some of the money on the end, and the other 150 that weren't promised. So I don't imagine it's going to be an infinite supply. Now, if it's real well received, they may do a reprint, but it certainly won't have all the Kickstarter goodies that this one had, all the add-ons and crap, which is part of why it got delayed so long. Okay, today people in the old school Renaissance movement spend a lot of time and effort discussing what ephemeral qualities made early D&D different, more imaginative, more appealing than its modern counterparts. Quite often the phrases mythic underworld and weirdness come up, and for me, psychedelic also enters into the equation. Anyone with a passing knowledge of pop culture history knows of the influence of fantasy in the mid-20th century psychedelic counterculture. For example, bootleg copies of The Lord of the Rings swept college campuses in the 60s, and popular 60s bands like Led Zeppelin include a reference to The Lord of the Rings and other fantasy works in their music. Since the TSR creatives are of that generation, I was wondering if the reverse was true. The influence of psychedelia is the first thing that comes to mind when I view many of Errol Otis's works. And there's a sense of strange wonder in many of Tramp's pieces that's missing in much of modern fantasy artwork today. I find that same sense of wonder and strangeness in the early D&D adventure writing too. Dave Sutherland's Queen of the Debonwed Pips, for example, Pits, always strikes me as an acid trip turned into a game. So, was there any influence of psychedelic counterculture, not necessarily drugs, but also psychedelic art and music, on the TSR creatives and thus on D&D? Gary, no. Dave, no. Neither one of them were into smoking pot or dropping acid. Arneson on acid, boy, that's a scary thought. No, they were not. To my knowledge, Errol Otis never did. I know Dave Sutherland never did anything like that, unless it was one time when he was in school before he came there, because he was very anti getting high and ended up dying an alcoholic. So he was from the other side of that coin. His dependencies ran the other way. During the time I was there, the only two potheads were me and Tramp. Tramp was a pothead before I met him. So I doubt seriously that anything I had to do had any influence on him. As I was not an artist, nothing there. No. I guess the overall answer to that is no. I don't know where Errol got his inspirations. I don't know what went on behind his eyelids. But I doubt it. All right. All right. Remember when in OD&D Volume 1, Magic explicitly says there's no reason why a player couldn't play a dragon, as long as they start as a sufficiently young one. Page 8 under other character types. Dragonborn, to me, demonstrate the timid conservatism and lack of creativity that pervades WotC's game design. It's an attempt to satisfy a perceived player desire to play a dragon, or something dragon-like, But instead of doing the work of designing rules for players to possibly play an actual dragon without ruining the balance at the table, the cowards who designed in 3rd through 5th, WotC C and D, just wrote up another humanoid reskin, this time dragon-flavored, and called it a day. Meanwhile, it forces DMs to shoehorn this new implied lore into their established campaigns or suffer whining entitlement of some players. Well, I see what you're saying, but no, I disagree with what I'm saying. If you're the DM, you don't have to put anything in your campaign you do not want. And I don't give a damn if they pick at the front of your house saying, WotC says so, WotC says so. Screw them. It's your campaign. If you don't want to play with something in your campaign, take it out. Change it. It's your game. It's your game. Screw WotC. It's your game. Do it. If you don't like the character or some crappy player character, don't have them. And just at the beginning of the whole thing, oh, by the way, Dragonborns have never been found on this world before. And whatever else you don't want, and bingo, there's your problem solved. DMs have to make judgment calls. They have to be arbitrary. Occasionally, they have to rule by fiat. And you say, no Dragonborn in my campaign. Easy. Okay, not sure if this has been answered, but I haven't found the official answer. Why were devils and demons made into two supernatural races? Well, part of the reason is that Gary was skirting around his religious sensibilities. Devils tend, not always, tend to be something associated with Judeo-Christianity. Better try that one again. It is getting late. Judeo-Christianity. Generally. Not say it all. Demons, on the other hand, are everywhere. The Arabian Nights, everywhere there's demons. Why not separate them? If you're not comfortable using devils because of whatever connotation you were raised with or is prevalent amongst your group, great, you got demons. I'd rather have demons any day than devils anyhow. Nobody can argue with you about demons. Nobody. Devils. I don't want to be quoted random passages from holy books about devils. Demons? Let's go with demons. Demons weren't as likely to offend religious right or religious conservatives, we'll call them. Well, actually, we called them Bible thumpers back then, to be honest. Demons weren't as offensive as devils. Oh, devils. Devils is, Jesus on one hand and God the Father and the Holy Ghost, and then there's Lucifer, We didn't have to go there if we didn't want to. You didn't have to go there if you didn't want to. Just stick with demons. Fine switch. Give me a fourth level demon in an adventure, and Katie bar the door. Those are powerful, powerful beasts. Powerful beasts. I guess that's the only answer I can give you, I guess. Let's see, in a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, about that, I'll be going to GaryCon, and I hope to see you all that can, there. Look me up. I'm only running 4 games this year, and I'm taking Saturday night off to socialize. I don't believe I've been to the TSR reunion since second or third year. So I guess it's time to catch up with a whole bunch of people I don't know because they were all hired after I left. But I'm still looking forward to it because I know a few of them. I'll be going to WizCon in Battle Creek. That's in July. And I believe that's the only commitments that I have for this year. After the really unpleasant experience I had last year at Gamehole Con from a player that had been drinking before he got to my table. Not anything that Alex and his wonderful crew did. But I just decided, no, I don't need to go to that con anymore. I'm not going to have a drunk or a half drunk show up at my table and then curse me out and tell me that the rules to the game that I didn't write are stupid. So that just soured me. So, no Gamehole Con in the fall. So either make it to Battle Creek in July or make it to Gary Con in a few weeks. And I'll see you there. In the meantime, keep sending in comments, questions, and give me grist for the mill, please. And with that, I'll say, Dodada Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. TSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.